Okay, well, let's officially get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore's quarterly webinar. Today we'll be going over our regional economic update and our new cybersecurity state of the market report. Here with me today is Nadir Mechairia, EAGB's research and market intern, and Nadir had a really big role in putting together both of these reports, and he's going to be helping me field questions, keep them organized, and probably provide some answers today. We're also joined by Karl Gumtow, who is the founder and CEO of CyberPoint International, a cybersecurity-focused company delivering innovative, leading-edge products, solutions, and services to customers worldwide. CyberPoint has been named one of Baltimore's best places to work for 3 consecutive years, but was only formed in just 2009. Karl has spent more than 20 years working in all levels of commercial and federal security communities. Before CyberPoint, Karl directed large engineering organizations, led numerous programs and initiatives related to security companies, and developed innovative business strategies for both large and small enterprises. EAGB is proud to support the incredible success of both Karl and CyberPoint, and I personally am very excited to host him today as our special guest. Karl, please feel free to jump in at any time to contribute some practical experience, help give a little bit of context to our report, and provide some insight into what we're talking about and the future of cybersecurity.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm pleased to be here, and as you know, we started the company here in Baltimore. We love Baltimore, and we love to see the region grow more and more in the cybersecurity area.
Great, and attendees, please feel free to ask questions at any time. There's a chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. Just go ahead and type it in, and Nadir and I and Karl will be able to answer as many questions as we can. Today we're going to keep the topics on economic development rather than getting into some of the federal government's cybersecurity practices. So with that, let's jump right into an overview of the region's economy. Greater Baltimore remains one of the 25 largest U.S. metropolitan areas with just under 2.75 million people living in the region. Like most older metros and nearly all Northeast Corridor metros, it grows relatively slowly compared to Southern and West Coast metros, which are considered a little bit newer. The region is also one of the most educated in the country, ranking in the top 10 for both percentage of population with bachelor's degrees and higher, and percentage of the population with a graduate or professional degree. Nearby DC ranks number 1 in both metrics. So together, Baltimore and Washington are really one of the most well-educated regions in the country and even in the world. A recent increase in the unemployment rate has dropped Greater Baltimore a little bit lower on this list of the top 25 metros. By unemployment rate. And as you can see, the unemployment rate has steadily and slowly trended downward with a little bit of fluctuation between quarters for the past 3 years, with the last 6 months seeing a little bit of a jump in the unemployment rate. And watching that will be important to see if the national rate has stabilized around 7.5%, which is a little bit higher than the Fed has announced that they want to see. And we'd like to see if the region can reverse the current trend and lower the local unemployment rate. And there can be a couple reasons for that, one of which we're going to get into with employment growth. It sounds a little bit counterintuitive saying that employment growth might be causing an increase in the unemployment rate, but if people are feeling really good about the economy and they think that there's jobs out there, discouraged workers who were previously not counted in the unemployment rate are re-entering the labor force and looking for jobs, and that causes them to be counted in that unemployment rate. So that little bit of a bump up might actually be a positive sign that people around the area think that there's opportunity out there where they didn't just 6 months or even a year ago. This marks the second consecutive quarter that the region has seen employment grow faster than the national average, which is a good sign for continued growth. And in the past decade, employment in Baltimore has grown as fast as some of the young upstart metros, which is a really positive sign. As you can see looking at the chart on the right, the only other Northeast Corridor metro to experience growth similar to these West Coast and Southern metros in the last 10 years is our neighbor, Washington, D.C. So what industries are responsible for that growth? Professional, scientific, and technical services and healthcare are strong core growth sectors that we've grown accustomed to seeing post positive net employment gains every year. But also looking at the last year's growth, a lot of the top sectors are ones that cycle with the economy. Wholesale trade, construction, retail trade, and administrative support fluctuate along with the economy. So when things are going well, they're generally hiring a lot of people and they get a lot of good business. So that means that seeing those at the top there is a pretty good projection for our economy. And finance is also shown on the fastest growing for the past year it's having something of a renaissance in Baltimore. I think 1,600 jobs in finance were added in the last calendar year, which is significant, especially when financial activities was one of the biggest losers of jobs over the last 10 years. And in the past decade, the region's growth has been concentrated in a few high-wage, high-growth, new economy sectors. The professional, scientific, and technical services, like we talked about, healthcare, and educational services are all good to see over there.
Patrick, I would just like to add on this one, even though your number 4 is professional, scientific, and technical services, cybersecurity is pervasive. I know we're going to talk more about cybersecurity later, but I challenge anyone to kind of look at those jobs and figure out what they don't need, where they don't need cybersecurity, where they don't use the IT aspects. So as we look into the cybersecurity update in a few charts later, think a little bit about that, because that is, cybersecurity and the education required to do those kinds of activities are very important.
Exactly, you're totally right. Foreclosure auctions are up 94% in Maryland so far in 2013, which is the third fastest spike in the country. But foreclosure filings have decreased, which is a positive sign for the future housing market. Maryland's a judicial foreclosure state, meaning that there's a very long period between filing and auction, much longer than in states that are either have smaller judicial periods or have no judicial filings at all. So in the future, in the next 6 months to a year, 3 years, we might be seeing foreclosure rates drop significantly. The percentage of foreclosed homes has dropped from a brief plateau in 2012, like you can see on the chart, but it's still above historical norms for the region. Typically, Baltimore is a lot more like Boston and Washington, D.C., down there at the bottom of the chart, than it is like Philadelphia and New York. But home prices remain above the national average and are still well below other coastal markets. Baltimore is a very cost-effective and a low-cost place to live compared to places like Washington, D.C. and New York. Like many other areas of the country, the region is experiencing a boom in housing prices after a year of fluctuating between declines and slow growth. Looking at venture capital captured by the region, Maryland has increased its share of IT venture capital acquired in the last 6 years, but has recorded just $500,000 in the last 5 quarters. It's still really early, so it's tough to compare that number with the 4-year periods that we're looking at historically. Maryland is also traditionally responsible for most of the region's biotech and healthcare venture capital. Growth in health IT and cybersecurity should help this region capture additional venture capital dollars in the future. So now that we have a pretty good idea of what it looks like internally, we like to look outside and see how people view us in the media and in other outlets around the country. The one I want to point out is that Maryland's ranked the top state for innovation and entrepreneurship, and that's by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That ranking is driven by the number of STEM jobs in the region, the growth of STEM employees in the region, and the amount of R&D that our universities do. Baltimore's also ranked a number 4 city for recent college graduates, and that's based on the number of young people in the area, the availability of an active social life, the city's walkability, and the general lower cost of living. We also like to celebrate some of the successes happening here in the region by looking at some of the top headlines from the last quarter. The Port of Baltimore might be seeing a pretty big boost in the amount of cargo coming in as the Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is one of the Port of Baltimore's largest customers, or the largest customer, enters into a global alliance with 2 other enormous European shipping companies. And so Mediterranean Shipping might be bringing those companies' cargo in through the Port of Baltimore, just that additional cargo coming in, and also Baltimore's ability to turn that into business maybe with those other 2 shipping companies. The Digital Harbor Foundation is partnering with Battelle Education and Arizona State University to create the STEM Core, which is a Common Core aligned blended learning model focused on STEM education. And it's going to focus on everything, but it's going to use education technology and blended learning to help kids in both the language arts curriculum and in mathematics and design thinking and other STEM fields. BWI is also scheduled to get a $125 million upgrade recently announced to encourage more international flights to leave from Baltimore Washington Airport. One thing. With a pretty good view of what's going on here in Greater Baltimore, we're going to go ahead and drill down and look at an industry that's really making a splash, and that is cybersecurity. More than 1.6 billion people are on the internet, and Cisco recently estimated that there are about 8.7 internet-connected devices, not necessarily mobile phones and iPads, but internet-connected devices in the world. For black hat hackers and cyber criminals, that is a tremendous value proposition. It also means that there is a widespread need for cybersecurity solutions around the world, both in public and private sectors. Cybersecurity is a very specific piece, depending on how you define it, of either IT or information security, and it really combines those two industries with the goal of protecting personal and state information. Well, how does it really affect the public sector? Well, according to the U.S. Cyber Command, there are approximately 250,000 cyber attacks on U.S. government networks every hour, adding up to 6 million a day. Clearly, this is a big concern for our government, and they're going to go ahead and increase spending on it, as would be expected, even in times of sequestration. In 2013, federal budget allocations set $406 million aside for Einstein, the Federal Intrusion Detection and Prevention Program. The global market is even bigger. The global cybersecurity market right now is worth about $68.35 billion, and it's growing. It's estimated to almost double to $120.1 billion before the end of the decade. And the private sector might be even more important moving forward. People tend to expect a level of protection when they bank or buy online. Successful attacks on Google, Yahoo, PlayStation Network, and global payments have left personal identification and financial information available. So this isn't just mom and pop shops, and it's not just about government issues. This is people's lives, and these are tech industries, tech companies, the biggest in the industry, that are falling victim to this. So cybersecurity is huge for the government, it's huge for the private sector, and it's huge for everyone involved. Some key facts that I want to pull out of the report and highlight right away. Central Maryland is home to one of the largest and most concentrated cybersecurity workforces in the country. There are nearly 20,000 cyber job openings in Maryland, 13,000 of which are in Greater Baltimore alone. Universities in Greater Baltimore are nationally recognized for their record in producing high-quality graduates with in-demand information assurance skills, and the region offers a number of support organizations and facilities to strengthen the burgeoning cybersecurity industry. Things like incubators, conferences, networking opportunities, and the Baltimore-Washington Cyber Task Force make a big difference to the cyber companies that are either moving here or starting here. Looking at this map of Greater Baltimore and Metropolitan DC, you can see that the two regions and the two cities are very close to one another and share a long border between the two metropolitan regions. And commuting patterns, as you can imagine, show a very fluid labor market between the two. So that the labor force available to Greater Baltimore and Greater Washington companies is significantly larger than the standard geographical definitions would suggest. For instance, the Maryland-DC suburbs, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Frederick County, by definition, a part of the DC metropolitan area, contribute over 100,000 people to Greater Baltimore companies every single day. Greater Baltimore is also a well-connected region. It makes it there's a ton of options around. They make it easy for companies and employees to commute around the country and the world efficiently. Amtrak and the MARC train connect Baltimore to DC, making it about a 1-hour commute for anyone, especially in the cybersecurity industry, that wants to maybe partner or work with some of the federal agencies along that Baltimore-Washington corridor. Because of that proximity to DC, Greater Baltimore is popular with the country's largest defense contractors, most of which has significant cyber operations. Companies are constantly seeking qualified cybersecurity professionals to fill positions, about almost 20,000 in Maryland alone. The growth of the industry will only create more career opportunities, and Central Maryland is well positioned to capture a lot of that growth. It's estimated that only 4% of the national cyber workforce is federally employed. The figures shown here do include federal employees in the executive branch and the Postal Service, so that nearly 76,000 of the cyber workforce that's employed in Central Maryland, maybe a little bit more than 4% because of where we are is federally employed, but that's still a tremendous number, both in the public sector and the private sector. Central Maryland is 45% more concentrated than the national average would suggest in cybersecurity occupations. 36% of that cyber workforce in the Baltimore-Washington corridor is located here in Central Maryland, and this region is more than twice as concentrated in information security than the US average. The industries that you see here, the occupations that you see here, were selected by the Economic Alliance to represent cybersecurity based on lists of the most popular cyber job titles, the most common cyber job titles, the most available cyber jobs, and the definitions of each of these occupations. If they matched up with cyber occupations and cyber goals, they were used somehow in this report. 15 colleges and universities in Maryland, more than any other state, are ranked as information assurance centers of excellence, including the University of Maryland College Park, which is not shown here. University of Maryland College Park is also home to the Maryland Cybersecurity Center, which stresses interdisciplinary solutions and a holistic approach to cyber education. On the right, you can see that nearly 58,000 degrees in STEM fields were conferred in 2011 alone. So Greater Baltimore has a really tremendous, in Maryland alone, and Maryland and Greater Baltimore specifically has a really tremendous STEM workforce that's available to these cybersecurity companies.
Hey, Patrick, that's actually an interesting chart to kind of talk about and think about. One of the things we worry about as employers are where do we find the staff? And there's some interesting statistics that have been done. One is that high school students, when they go off to college, they travel within 100 miles. 50% of them are within 100 miles of their home. So that means 50% of them are actually probably going to stay in the region they're in. So if you got 58,000 degrees that are being conferred in STEM areas, that means there's probably 29,000 people that are going to be local, that are going to stay here, that want to stay here. And that creates a wonderfully rich environment to get this young talent. So we kind of think about all the other regions, all the other areas where there are great schools and great areas. That right there is the future. That's the young talent that we want. And statistics show that if we have the great companies, the great opportunities, and the great things here, we're going to keep at least 50% of those.
That's a really good point. And of course, we'd like to keep 50% or even more. And fortunately, we have all those jobs, like we talked about before, that are available to those students. So hopefully we can keep 50% or more. The federal government has financed over $1.2 billion in computer science R&D expenditures in fiscal year 2011 alone. And Johns Hopkins University really leads the way in this department. They spent more than any other university in the country on math and computer science R&D in fiscal year 2011, totaling almost $1.3 million. Maryland ranks fourth among states for R&D expenditures on math and computer science. But looking at that list, the states ahead of us are significantly larger than us, with significantly more colleges. California, Pennsylvania, and Texas, there's just so many more people there and so many more universities that when Johns Hopkins, UMBC, University of Maryland, that those schools that lead the way in this region, there's only a handful of them compared to all the University of California schools that engage in computer science R&D. And the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Program lists 10 active awards in Maryland, totaling almost $4 million of investment. So this region's really good at getting federal dollars behind R&D. But what about venture capital and private equity dollars? Well, the story's a little bit different. In some cases, it's much the same. Baltimore, Washington ranks third amongst the most concentrated cybersecurity markets for venture capital investment, but we're still falling short of Boston and San Francisco. As you can see, we're well ahead of where Denver and Seattle are over the last 4 years in capturing the venture capital dollars in cybersecurity industries, but we're less than half of, we captured less than half of what Boston did and only a fraction of what San Francisco grabbed. But 2012 venture capital investment in firewall and software encryption startups rose 10% to just under $600 million. And that number and other numbers for cybersecurity industries or markets are going to continue going up. Cyber is a huge spot for investment right now, and a lot of companies are jumping on it. So with that growth in the dollars available, hopefully our region can capture additional dollars in the venture space. This map shows the incredible clustering of IT companies and federal institutions across that Baltimore-Washington corridor. The largest IT operations here are some of the biggest IT companies in the world, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans. The clustering of these IT operations across the corridor is a good sign for continued innovation due to agglomeration benefits. When you put this many people together that have this level of skill and expertise, their ideas can bounce around and they can solve problems easier than they would be able to if they were off somewhere by themselves.
Patrick, that's
we're full. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to interrupt there. It's an exciting chart there. When you really think about cybersecurity, which is an international problem, it's an opportunity in all areas. When I sit back and look at the companies that you put out there, the largest IT operators, everyone would probably guess Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. not everyone's going to think about Verizon Wireless. They're not going to necessarily think that the IT and the things that go into the cell phones and all that is connected network. Constellation Energy, when you look at all the power, all the things that are connected, all that stuff, how many people see someone walking around checking the power gauge these days, right? A lot of that is in the IT environment. T. Rowe Price, when you start looking at the financial communities and how you get that information on the web and securing your data, that's pretty exciting. Now you have all those other government organizations, but the real exciting thing is the number of IT jobs that are not defense, that are not government, that are just everyday activities that you need. Talking on your phone, using the lights, actually checking your finances. Those are great things when you sit back and think about how pervasive IT is.
Exactly. And looking at those federal institutions, it's easy to point out the NSA, the Fort Meade, where Cyber Command's located, the ones that are traditionally cybersecurity focused. But there's also NIH, which is going to have some need for cybersecurity and protecting medical records and protecting intellectual property. And the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, which is part of developing the National Cyber Range, which is a scale model of the internet to carry out cybersecurity experimentation. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff going on, and it's not just in companies that are traditionally cyber focused. There's a lot of protection and a lot of innovation going on in that realm across the board. And that's helped us grow up some startups that are here. For example, RiskGive, which is based in Baltimore, here in Federal Hill, is a social media risk management company, and they recently raised $2.2 million in seed capital. And just 5 years ago, people would have maybe raised eyebrows at a social media risk management group. But as we've seen, Twitter, when the AP Twitter was hacked, the stock markets dropped, hundreds of points when they were when people were sending out false tweets from that hacked account. So that social media element, that networked life, is becoming increasingly important, and protecting your digital self is just as important as protecting, what's going on in the real world.
I think
LightPoint Security is one of 24 companies out of 500 applicants selected for Wall Street Journal's Startup of the Year competition. They're currently ranked 9th overall, and the competition ends soon, so I'm going to go ahead and encourage everybody to go on the Wall Street Journal website and vote for LightPoint Security. But just to be up there, to be 9 out of 500 right now, is tremendous. And SourceFire, which is a Columbia-based cybersecurity company, just announced yesterday morning they're being acquired by Cisco for $2.7 billion, with the deal expected to be completed in the second half of the year.
Patrick, one of the interesting things there also about SourceFire is not just the amazing, fact that they sold for such a large number and they grow. They really did grow here. Marty's done a great job, but one of the things that you probably don't look at is that some of his first investment came from DBED here in Maryland, in Baltimore, and that's a great story to sit back and look how where they got a little seed money here in Baltimore have grown up to be an incredible company, known worldwide. I was in a couple international countries here recently, and their IT infrastructure, everyone's using SourceFire. It's awesome. And now to see them actually have the success in being purchased by Cisco is amazing. And there's a lot of other, great things on here. When you look at this chart, I also ran into Greg Smith, the CEO of CoolSpan, in another country we were doing business in. So one of the things that's great when you start to look at these companies, it's not just looking at what kind of business are they getting here in the region, it's what kind of business are they getting across the nation and across the world. These companies are touching so many places across the world. Some of the Tenable products also I run into in different international countries. So, I think we should always remember that when we look at the investment and the acquisition, this is not just coming to Maryland to do business in Maryland, but it's coming to Maryland to do business globally. And that's a key thing. And that's what several of these very successful companies, SafeNet, SourceFire, CoolSpan, other folks have actually done. And that's an area to tie into.
You're absolutely right. And when we look at the key assets that are here in the region, there are a ton that can help people not only do business here, but really significantly grow here. Looking at this list, everything that's shown is, of course, cybersecurity focused, but Carl's absolutely right. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Maryland Department of Business and Economic Development. DBED's done a ton of work in the cybersecurity industry in Maryland, starting with the Cyber Maryland report a few years ago, which has grown into the Cyber Maryland map, the Cyber Maryland conference, and the DBED had a really instrumental role in getting the Maryland Cybersecurity Investment Tax Credit approved, which encourages in-state and out-of-state investment in Maryland cybersecurity companies. That Cyber Maryland conference, this year it's expanding to include a job fair, and as always, it'll be including the Maryland Cyber Challenge and Competition, which is currently accepting applications. It's a competition between groups in high school, groups in college, and groups of young professionals who have an interest and a desire to perform in cybersecurity, and they want to demonstrate their practical skills, and it's a really cool competition.
Hey, can I
EW Tech
talk on
and
that,
UMBC.
Patrick? Yeah. The Cyber Challenge, which I know they're taking applications now, is a whole lot of fun. You know, we had a couple teams in the last couple years, and as the CEO of the company, kind of getting engaged and looking at these problems. You know, one of the things is solve some of the problems. It's not necessarily a cyber person. It's a thinker. It's a problem solver. And I encourage not just cyber companies out there, but people who like computers, people who like problems, to go out and get involved in that. It's, you know, I think it's very inexpensive to participate. You know, it's fun, and I think it's a team builder for your company. So I've seen high schools actually get involved. It's great to watch the young kids, the college kids, the exciting, but also the professionals who take it serious and have fun doing it. I think you should do that. And I know that I think I don't know if I have the fact 100% right, but I saw an email come through that Leola Blakefield High School won the national competition for high schools in the Cybersecurity Challenge, and they were involved last year. It's great to see these young kids actually get involved in this and actually do it, you know, in the same forum as college kids and professionals doing this work. So for anyone that's out there listening, you know, and you haven't put a team together, you know, you should put a team together, get involved, see how it works. It's a great competition. And then the Cyber Maryland conference that you talked about also, you know, this is it's a great conference. I mean, I don't know if it's, you know, doubled from year one to year two, but it got, you know, a lot bigger. I expect it to be even bigger this year. And it's right here in Baltimore. It's a lot of fun. I think people learn a lot. And the fact that a job fair is going to be there also, that should get some additional, you know, employers engaged. And also, I don't want to go by without talking about the National Cybersecurity Hall of Fame. You know, we all have opportunities to be secure with the devices we use, and then we have an industry based on many people that have done great things over time. And you know, we had the first year last year where we inducted some great folks into the Cybersecurity Hall of Fame, and I know the nominations and selection is going on right now for this year's event. It was a great event. General Alexander spoke. You know, it was very well attended. We had young folks here in CyberPoint who were just excited to go say hello to some of these great names. And I encourage you to go out to the website, get involved in that activity. It's a great activity. So these are just some of the things, as you mentioned, Patrick, that are going on here. I just couldn't let some of these key assets go by without talking to them at this point.
Of course, yeah. No, like Carl said, this is really just a small selection of the support and key assets that we have right here. I do want to extend a congratulations to BW Tech at UMBC, who has fully leased their research and technology park, including the cyber incubator. And the incubator is going to be expanding, the cyber incubator will be expanding in this fall to offer more space and additional programming. And they run a terrific shop over there, and their Sync program is also really cool. It's a subset of that cyber incubator, and in a partnership with Northrop Grumman to commercialize cyber technology. And they essentially provide Northrop Grumman-backed seed capital for those smaller companies. And altogether, that cyber incubator hosts, in addition to providing traditional incubator services, they host the Cyber Teenies and Cyber Briefings, which are really terrific ways to network with other people in cybersecurity and just spread knowledge and continue learning about cybersecurity. So where does that leave us? What are the next steps? Well, there's a tremendous private sector opportunity, like we said. As huge as the opportunities for contract with the government are here in this region, the private sector industries are beginning to demand cyber solutions as well. Our lives are almost entirely networked, and that digital life needs to be protected. Facilitating commercialization and growth in the private sector will become increasingly important, and this region has the ability, the resources, and the people to take advantage of widespread uses for cybersecurity. And along with that is business support and financing. Attracting innovation capital might be a little bit of a challenge for this region right now, but to ensure competitiveness in the private sectors, Greater Baltimore and Baltimore-Washington corridor in total needs to improve its venture capital acquisition. Federal funds are adequate for now, but private investment will help divorce us from a reliance on the federal government, and it'll prepare us for the private sector, which will likely outstrip government spending in the future, based on what's going on in other countries. Funds created and managed by TEDCO and DBED, like we said, are really important to support, maintain, and possibly expand because they really help these companies get off the ground. In terms of education, I actually went to one of the cyber briefings at UMBC recently, just last week, and one of the panelists pointed out that we have had hundreds of years to perfect our teaching methods for mathematics, for languages, and learn how to prepare people to be lawyers and politicians. But cybersecurity is really only 15 years old, and people are learning on the job, and things are changing all the time. And there's really no standard set of best practices for how to engage people and how to teach people cybersecurity and how to learn cybersecurity as they go on. And I think that's also a value, an area where Greater Baltimore can offer value. Every time I hear someone speak on the cyber workforce and the availability of jobs, I come away with essentially the same message, is that certificates and degrees are great and very important, but the application of practical knowledge is needed, and that's why the things like the Maryland Cyber Competition are so cool and so important. Incorporating performance into our education with tools like education technology can go a long way towards filling the jobs that are available and ensuring that our students have long and satisfying careers in cybersecurity. With that, we'd like to open up a little bit of a discussion with Karl. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. But Karl, I'd like to start off with asking you about where cyber is going. Cybersecurity right now is expected in online transactions, and people trust that banks and things like their electronic tax returns are going to be protected. What else will the average person see cybersecurity in day-to-day activities?
It's a great question, Patrick. You know, the one thing is, I guess I would flip the question. I would say, where you're not going to see it. You sit back and you look at go into a website that it's part of, logging into this WebEx, there's a password, right? You're logging into a password to see information just on the internet. You go into your web application, you want to go into a banking application, you might have a token that gives you a certain number, a hash number that you actually type in. And then you also type in a password. A lot of times it's looking at two-factor authentication. Those are logins. The cybersecurity, in the power side, protecting, what if someone were to kind of go in and basically start to mess with your meters and change those things, and all of a sudden you get these great bills. What happens? Someone would go in and, tell someone your propane tank is empty, and all of a sudden the propane truck shows up and starts to try to fill things up. You're going to see it in banking. You're going to see it in everything. Your cars. How many, think about the car, the navigation system that you have in the car. That's information. What if that were to go down? It's almost impossible for me to imagine something that's not going to have cybersecurity involved in it. It's funny. What about some of the clothing? I don't know if you've ever seen some of this stuff, but some of the nanotechnology, those companies here in Baltimore now that are looking at nanotechnology, which would network your clothes. So you walk by an actual sign, it might show personal information about you and actually show up and give you an advertisement for you that you might want to see. What if you're at the gas station? This is all personal information that would be shared. You could be at the gas station where it recognizes you're there, it recognizes your car's there, and it maybe tells you, hey, you need an oil change, 1.2 miles down the road is a place to get your oil changed. That's all information about you, your car, your person. That all has to be secured. So it's kind of hard for me to say where it's going to be because I think it's going to be everywhere. I try to think of something where it's not. So, oh, we're going to go out and run and be healthy. Well, how many of you now have devices that tell you how much your heart's beating, how well you sleep, all these different devices. So it's everywhere. So I probably could talk for the rest of the time just on where it might be and crazy ideas and how it might be used.
I think that's a pretty good way to put it, Carl. I went to one of the CyberPoint speaker series not even a month ago, I don't think, and the speaker talked about the Internet of Things and a lot of things that aren't necessarily traditionally considered computers or hackable devices that we've got to start worrying about. Things like pacemakers and other medical devices. And recently, it was found that the SIM cards in your phone could actually be physically hacked. So I think you're right. I think it's going everywhere.
Yeah, and thinking about things that can be hacked, if you've heard of femtocells and where things are going in the wireless communication, there's an article out on the news now where that's been hacked. Those are things that are in the future. So cybersecurity will be everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually interesting. You were talking a bit about, I just reflect on a couple areas in your presentation that were exciting. One is I really don't want it to get away in this call without kind of talking about capital availability here in Baltimore. One is $2 billion to start is a very large number. It's a very large number when you're looking at companies that want very small amount of money to start. Some of those incubator companies, accelerator companies, $2 billion goes a long, long way. And to be number three in dollars spent in the region or invested, not spent, invested in the region is tremendous. And what I encourage folks, money is out there. Money's out there for, at a minimum, two types of folks. Great leaders, people who have proven themselves in large companies, small companies, in academia, in government, to go take risks and build companies. Money's out there for those great leaders. Secondly, money's out there for great ideas. If you have an idea that you're coming up when Patrick, when you ask that question about what is the future, if those others, people listening to this WebEx, that they have an idea, they go, oh, Carl forgot this, Patrick forgot this. If those are new and novel ideas, there are people that want to invest in those ideas. And usually what I noticed is on the investment side, the investors want to invest in people who invest themselves, not only with their money, but with their time, their commitment, their ideas, their passion. So while $2 billion is a lot of money, goes a long way, there's money here to be invested in and to really take forward. So I really wouldn't want to go there. I wouldn't want to like anyone to think that there isn't money here. There's a lot of money here.
No, you're absolutely
Secondly,
right. And that's a very good point to make. A
yeah,
lot of times when we're looking at that venture capital, companies in the biohealth and medical spheres, it just takes longer for things to be approved, to reach market, et cetera, and the numbers that they need are much higher. But you're absolutely right. These companies in the tech space, in the cyber space, their startup costs are relatively low. So while $2 billion might not be what San Francisco, for example, sees, it's probably it's enough. It's there and the capital is available.
yeah, and there's a lot of incubators you talked about and accelerators. You talked about Baltimore where you are now. They're looking for those companies that want to actually do something. You talked about UMBC. Of course, there's the Emerging Technology Center. There's so many areas that want to help these companies do something and invest on their idea and keep the cost in check. That's a great thing. Another thing you talked about is when you think about money, there's not just money here in Baltimore. There's money in ideas and opportunities in DC. And you talked about how easy it is to get back and forth from Baltimore, DC. I can tell you, I don't drive there anymore. I take the Amtrak. It's 20 minutes pretty much from Penn Station to Union Station, and that is, it's almost, it takes the same amount of time for me to kind of get there than it does to get down to Columbia, from Baltimore. So I think access, when you start to think about Baltimore and Washington, and you think about the overall area, things that you do here in Baltimore, while I think we have a better location and a better life, you're right next door to Washington D.C. You're right next door to the federal government and the different ideas. So
Yeah,
you harped on that early on the I just wanted to make sure how close it really is. Make that point.
yeah, that level of access is nearly unprecedented, and it's certainly not available in really any other city around the country. I want to interrupt the discussion for just a second and say thank you to Tom McDonough. He provided a little bit more information about the Loyola Blakefield team that entered the Cyber Olympics. They actually won the 2013 Global Cyber Olympics after being seeded 10th, then being ranked 3rd after the semifinals. Over 70 teams worldwide competed in the tournament, and the winners were from a high school right here. So I thank you, Tom, for clarifying that, and congratulations to the Loyola Blakefield team, of course.
Yeah, congratulations. That's awesome. They can all come down for interviews next week.
So actually, Karl, now that we're talking a little bit about high school cyber, kids at high school that are interested in cyber, how does Greater Baltimore need to adapt to continue growing with this industry? And how can we educate our students to ensure a pipeline of talent that has relevant skills, and that's even a few years down the road after what's cutting edge now has sort of fallen by the wayside?
You know, for me, this is really near and dear to my heart. Not only am I an engineer, but I have a rising senior in high school who's looking to go study computer science. So I've looked at so many of the universities. I thought through the curriculums. It's what's interesting is we've gone out and visited some of the schools, around the nation, and some of those very top, schools, they don't have really good insight into what cybersecurity is.
Mhm.
So I was really kind of shocked by that. But to kind of go back what you just talked about with Loyola, um, getting kids involved in those activities, right? That's exciting. They start to see that working with computers and solving problems is fun. Make it practical. Let them do hands-on assignments. I applaud Tom and Loyola Blakefield for going out and engaging them very, very aggressively. um, that helps. Getting the kids involved in the IT departments, getting them to to take practical classes. The school my daughter goes to, she was able to take a computer science class freshman, sophomore, junior, senior years. Creating those classes or be good, will be excellent. Uh, Not all schools have those ideas. The other one is, folks getting in and mentoring folks, providing examples of who you want to be and when, how to go do that. And I think we also need to think through, it's actually interesting, I'll say education. Cybersecurity to me is maybe not the best field for us to think about kids are going to go get involved in. STEM education is a nice base and foundation, and you go to some of these schools like UMUC, they have cybersecurity classes and degrees. UMBC, they have some things there. Other schools are starting to bring them on. I would challenge them to think a little differently, not cybersecurity, but cyber science. I think that's the future, and if we can start to create, just like people think about computer science and physics and engineering, what if there's a cyber science curriculum that these kids can want to go be part of? That to me would be exciting. So I kind of a lot of ideas here, but I think number one, get kids to engage in working with computers, not
Mhm.
just playing video games. It's okay to play video games and online games and things like that. I encourage that, but spend the time doing programming. I saw an article recently that I think it was about England now is requiring computer classes in elementary schools, secondary schools, to teach them how to program computers. We need to do some of that. We need to get folks understanding, just like we learn writing, writing in English, we learn mathematics. We need to learn how to program this computer, how to make the computer do the things that you want. And there's such great things. I can only speak from experience. I have a younger daughter who's in a great curriculum over at Friends School where they're doing a robots and rockets class. That's exciting to me. I
Yeah.
think we need kids to do those kind of practical activities.
We've got a question from Jonathan, and Jonathan, I can give you my answer. Jonathan asked if the talent is currently available to support this industry. My answer, Jonathan, is that we have a really tremendous and skilled workforce, one of the best and biggest in the country, like we said, but 20,000 jobs in Maryland alone says a lot. That says that there's, 20,000 more people that they would like to have in this industry. But I'll go ahead and turn this one over to Karl since he probably sees this day to day. So Karl, is the talent currently available to support the growth that cybersecurity in general wants to see?
Yeah, Jonathan, I don't think you're going to like my answer. I think it's yes and no. There are great folks in this industry, people that understand cybersecurity, people that have the STEM education, whether it's physics or computer science or engineering. It's just that we don't have enough. We don't have enough folks that are interested in these areas. We don't have enough of the kids wanting to be in these STEM education degrees. So we need to do more. We need to encourage kids to get more involved. But let me also, because there's a lot of areas, there's an important point here when we think about this. There's two types of cybersecurity professionals. There's those that get STEM degrees and go off and do what I kind of coined earlier, cyber science, going to apply those STEM education to cybersecurity jobs. There are also, I'll say, softer non-engineering degrees that are required to do the policies, the implementation, and all those kind of activities. Cybersecurity is not just the technical part, although I like to think about only the technical parts, unfortunately, a lot of times. But there is a lot of different things. Also, those folks that are artists, designers, people that want to think through that. How do you navigate a website quickly? How do you find that information? You know how to use Google. You know how to go find certain things. How to convey lots and lots and lots of data to individuals. We need them all. A lot of times you'll see people not just talk about STEM, but they'll talk about STEAM. And I think, from my perspective, some of the best people, some of the people at the very top of that talent curve are folks that have strong technical knowledge and acumen, but also have the ability to view things and do design and think that way, think creatively. So kind of a long answer, I think, Jonathan, but the key thing is there are great people out there. There's a great class of folks that are coming, especially here in the Baltimore region, but finally, there's not enough. And we can't go try to find out how do we create more people in college. We have to focus longer term in the future. We have to get those kids in elementary. We have to get those kids in middle school. We have to get those kids in high school to want to be involved in computer, in IT in general, in technology in general, in STEAM education.
Well, changing gears a little bit, Kathy sent in a question about the cybersecurity tax credit that we have here in Maryland. So I'm going to turn it over to Nadir, who has all of the information about it right in front of him.
Looking into the cyber tax credit, it's an incentive to get in-state cybersecurity companies to grow. It's for qualified Maryland cybersecurity companies. They must follow the qualifications of the bill. They have to follow the appropriate certification process, and they have to receive an investment from a qualified investor. It's a refundable tax credit, which is equal to 33% of the investment. So to be a qualified company, though, company has to be in business for no more than 5 years, has less than 50 full-time employees, and has its headquarters and base of operations in Maryland, not publicly traded on any exchange, has not participated in the tax credit program for more than one prior fiscal year, owns or has property, license, any proprietary technology, and has an aggregate capitalization of at least $100,000. So essentially, it's to create the growth in the cybersecurity market for these upcoming companies, so that we can really strengthen the Maryland area in that industry.
And if I remember correctly, one of the biggest things about it was that the money doesn't have to come from an investor that's located here in Maryland. It could be someone in New York who thinks that we have a really fantastic company that they want to put money into that can then refund up to 33% of that investment via a tax credit.
You know, Patrick, I see Jonathan put up another question there. Are we losing the top talent to DC and Northern Virginia? You know, I can't speak in general, but specifically, I can tell you that we've had multiple people, here at CyberPoint, we've had multiple people, from Virginia move to the Baltimore region. In fact, we've brought a lot of people to this area. I think the numbers, can't exactly, but about 20% of our staff are people who move from another state. One of those, states is Virginia. One of those states is California. One of those states is Hawaii. One of those, states is New York. It's pretty amazing. And really one of the key things is the environment that you create. And this is where you think about the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore and the things, trying to create an environment. It's the harbor that we have here. It's the schools that we have here. That's attracting folks here. It's fun. Think about cybersecurity. Think about IT professionals. They want, to the greatest extent, I think they want to be in an environment that's exciting. And that, I love to see, when we first started the company, just over, almost 4 years ago, I'd walk around downtown Baltimore and I wouldn't see anyone that was related to the company or that I knew. It's kind of almost felt like a tourist every single day. Now I can't walk outside without seeing someone that I don't know, that's either here at CyberPoint or, from one of the companies over in Federal Hill or, one of the other companies that are doing IT activities over in Harbor East and other places. It's exciting. And so while we probably lose people to DC and Northern Virginia time and time again, we get a lot of great ones here. And it's really, I'd have to underline the concept of we, in your comment, Jonathan Hall. Are we losing people? I think we are gaining people, and it's how big if you don't create the environment, if we don't create the environment that folks want to be in, then we'll lose more talent. But I think we're getting our fair share of them from Virginia. I don't think we've hired anyone directly from DC except for maybe out of college. But that's an opportunity. I think I'll take on that challenge. I think our environment would be better.
That's a good answer. And I only want to add, of course, that we talked about commuting patterns earlier. Of course, that's not relocations from around the region or around the country, but more than 20,000 people that live in Northern Virginia commute into Greater Baltimore every day for work. So that, there's certainly a stock of people that even if they don't move to this metropolitan area, they're certainly working here. So Karl, how big is private sector going to be for cybersecurity? And I guess we've already talked about this a little bit, but right now the United States is one of very few countries where public spending on cybersecurity matches private spending. Are we going to see a shift in the coming years where private sector spending just consistently outpaces and outstrips public spending?
I think the answer is yes, because I'm going to basically say right now we're spending as much money in the private sector as we are in the public sector on IT and cybersecurity. I don't think our government or other governments are going to grow, but I do believe the private sector is going to grow. So I think there's going to be more and more growth in the cybersecurity area, the IT area in general. And in general, again, I want to point out that I still look at the opportunity not as a Maryland opportunity, not as a USA opportunity, but a global opportunity. And I think if you were to measure how much money is spent on cybersecurity and IT and technology in general across the world, I think you would find private much higher than public. And I think it's going to stay there and go a lot further. So, I think companies will want to think about not just the federal business, not just the U.S. business, but the global business. I mean, it's globalization in its greatest. This is the perfect example of all that.
Mm-hmm. Kathy sent in another email with a question about what are the top 3 things that tech companies want and need when leasing space. And I'm going to let Karl talk about what CyberPoint looked for, and I don't have this specific information, and I'm sure it's different for every company, but I'm going to venture 2 guesses. One is significant internet connectivity, which is generally becoming ubiquitous, especially in major cities. But a fast and reliable internet connection, I'm sure, is very important. I know they're bringing fiber internet out to where I live in Carroll County, to business parks that are out there, because that's really a draw for a lot of people. And 2, I know WhoFound, which is not cybersecurity, but is a tech-based company here in Baltimore. They recently announced that they're looking for a newer, funky sort of looking space that they could probably, I'm assuming it's going to be one that they can change around to fit their needs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karl. So Karl, what did you look for when you were leasing space when CyberPoint was just starting out?
Yeah, it's a great question, because this is the key to what we were just talking about with Jonathan. Number one, it was the environment. Where do you want to be? When you walk outside, where do you want to be? Personally, for me, I wanted to walk out and be able to visit things. We have people, I'm looking out my window right here. I've got the dolphin show over at the aquarium. I want to be able to walk after work and go see that. So many people, here, I see a lot of folks where the families will come into the city on Friday and spend time either at a ball game or at the aquarium or at the Children's Museum or the Ripley's Believe It or Not, or just grabbing a drink after work with their friends, grabbing dinner at great restaurants that we have here. That environment was super important to us. The second part of that is the amenities that were around us to actually get things done. So number one, like you said, internet connectivity, infrastructure, things like that. How did that fit? We didn't worry too much about that because we figured we can get there. The internet's going to be available to us. But what are the schools? Who can we collaborate with? The incubators, the other companies, those kind of things. That's all part of the infrastructure. And the other piece was important, was finding the people. Actually finding the people and having a city that is fun, but also has residential areas that people can live in. Another 20-25% of our staff kind of live in this city, very close to where we are. So that was important in creating that environment. And finally, for us, it was about breaking the mold. That was one of the key things that we did. Not many companies like ours are downtown in the city. We wanted to come to an environment and start to bring, kind of information to the environment and others, and start to make the city think about cybersecurity and understand the importance of technology jobs. We love all the other jobs that are here in the city, but we didn't think there were enough. There were a couple, but weren't enough companies here really kind of talking about technology and cyber. And that was one of the reasons early on that we started the Cybersecurity Speaker Series. And every quarter, pretty much, we have a speaker that wrote a book or some notoriety come in and speak about cybersecurity, and we start to educate the area. So those were some of the things that were really important. And if you don't mind me throwing in a fourth one, and this is a bit of a focused on things that I care most about, it was being able to connect and give back. When we saw this city and we saw all the things that were going on, there were places that could benefit from having senior technical staff running around and mentoring, kids like over at Cristo Rey. We had the ability to give back and help schools, help hotels, help nonprofits get involved and make things better. That giving back opportunity here in the city was also really, really important to our decision and what we looked for in our space.
I appreciate the insight, Karl. And with that, since we're right about at 11 o'clock, I just want to say thank you to everybody who attended, and a very special thank you to Karl for joining us today. I encourage everyone here to download and check out the Cybersecurity Market Report. It's available in the top right-hand corner of your screen under Files. And the regional economic update that we also covered in the beginning is listed there for download. Of course, both of the reports offer a little bit more information than we were able to cover today. So we encourage you to go ahead and read those and share them out. Our website also has a number of other publications, including an IT report. And I have here a link to the Central Maryland Entrepreneurs Resource Guide, which was recently published by the Economic Alliance in tandem with BHI and Montgomery County Economic Development to provide a list, a compendium of resources for entrepreneurs in all organizations, or I'm sorry, in all industries across Baltimore and Central Maryland. So we think it's a terrific resource, and it's constantly being updated in its digital form. So with that, again, Karl, thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone for coming. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you very much for having me, Patrick.